请收看《用易利人天》。
天手多，为同学来建屋，大家合业建，做人处事可安心，做人处事可安心，大家合业建，身体健康心安眠，身体健康心安眠，大家合业建，做事工作可顺心，做事工作可顺心，大家合业建。
Thank you so much for this very clearly structured and very powerful and very inspiring presentation. We will now move on to the Zhuangzi. We have Erik Hoogcarspel, who comes to us from the Netherlands, talk about conversion and transcendental phenomenology in this ancient Taoist text. Thank you. I think we do have a PowerPoint.
I have for you 3 questions, and after having answered them, I will move on to implement the answers by going briefly over the 7 inner chapters of the Zhuangzi. But before I start, let me first remind you of a dialogue in the Zhuangzi, famous dialogue between Zhuangzi and Huizi. It's in the chapter called the Autumn Flood, and it's about the joy of fish. Zhuangzi and Huizi walk past over a bridge, and Zhuangzi says, "Well, look at the joy of the fish in the brook." Huizi says, "Well, how do you know fish are joyous? Because you're not a fish." Zhuangzi says, "Well, how do you know?" "I don't know, because you're not me." And at the end, Zhuangzi says, "Well, let's go back to the beginning. You knew that the fish were joyous because you asked me about it. You asked me how I know it. I knew it when I was walking over the bridge." Now, this seems very insignificant, and several translators have tried to find an explanation, which I find rather unsatisfactory. To my mind, what Zhuangzi says here is, look, I'm not a fish psychologist, so I don't know nothing about fishes. I'm not psychic, I don't know what you think. But the joy of the fish is something obvious. It's something we don't have to prove. It's something we don't have to substantiate. The joy of the fish is obvious. It's just an appearance. You knew it, you saw it, I saw it, and there's nothing to it. Which means that, to my mind, Zhuangzi was familiar with what is now called the phenomenological gaze, the way to look at things as just appearances without any substance, momentary, and nothing but appearances. Well, this brings us to the first question: what is phenomenology? As you may know, it has been invented by a guy called Edmund Husserl in the late 1900s and early 20th century, and he was looking for certainty. And he observed that we only know about what we know about the world are mainly our interpretations. And they have to be based on something. So what is certain? Certain is, according to Husserl, what is given by itself, what appears to us by itself. For instance, a thought. A thought is nothing but a thought, and it's completely transparent to us. Our perceptions are partly self-given, partly interpreted. So what happens if we focus on what we know, on what is certain, if you focus on just the appearing? This focus Husserl called a reduction, a phenomenological reduction. So in order to make phenomena appear, we have to limit our focus, our attention. We have to leave our explanations and theories about the world and just accept things as they appear. So if we do this, we reduce ourselves to being a bare witness, what Husserl called a transcendental ego. The transcendental ego is not me or you, but just the factor which gives unity and coherence to our knowledge. It is also what any knowledge and meaning makes possible. So phenomenology is the study of phenomena. It's a study of the obvious. It's a study of that which shows itself by itself. And it doesn't mean that we're left with only incidental events. It only means that we drop our preconceptions about what is and what is not. So in the end, Husserl says, after the phenomenological reduction, nothing is lost. Everything is still there, only we lose some preconceptions. Which brings me to the second question, what is a reduction? In fact, it is quite a theoretical word, but we're familiar with it because we may experience it every day. Some things are very close to a reduction. For instance, when you see a cloud, it's very easy to see the cloud as something that just appears. We just have to do a little focus on the cloud and we see something appear. We see the cloud as a pure phenomenon. If you look at our own mobile phone, it's very difficult to see that this is a mere phenomenon because we are always involved in it. We immediately think about what we can, what we can't do with, and etc. A reduction can be compared to something like, is also very prominent in certain kinds of activity. For instance, we're doing Tai Chi. If you do Tai Chi or you give the Tai Chi the opportunity to do you're just moving and your thoughts are with exactly what you're doing. Your movement become pure phenomena and you forget about yourself. Another example is swimming. You drop your clothes, all your status is gone, you immerse yourself into the uncommon environment of the water, and all your thoughts is about your movements, your breathing, etc. This is a phenomenological reduction. If I get back to the clouds, if we look at a cloud, normally it's very easy to see it as a pure phenomenon. But some people have a hard time doing that. Why? Because they're meteorologists. When they look at clouds, they have a whole theory about what clouds can do, what they will do, etc., etc. And so they have to go an extra mile. They have to drop their own preconceptions. And this dropping of your preconceptions, Husserl called what was it? An interruption, an epoche. The term epoche, Husserl got from the ancient Greek skeptics, who had a very peculiar view on life that said you really get to the reality if you drop everything you know about it. So after reducing your experience to pure phenomena, you're left not with real material to study. So what do you do to study phenomena? You try to think about their meaning. And for that, you have to think about their essence. And Husserl invented a new reduction, which he called the identical reduction, which means that you drop every coincidental thing about the phenomena, you just look at their essence. This had, however, the disadvantage that meaning is restricted to culture. So it's local. And you may discover a lot of things about the structure of meaning in which of which the phenomenon is part of, but you are not really thinking about the phenomenon as a phenomenon, the appearance as a appearance. So late in his life, Husserl came up with a new kind of reduction, which he called the transcendental reduction. And now it becomes interesting because a transcendental reduction is the art of experiencing and thinking about a phenomenon, an appearance, as just an appearance. And this is something we rather rarely experience. It is at least not intensely. There are situations which seem, well, to come close to it. Imagine you're looking at a TV screen and you're looking at something you're very interesting. Say you like soccer and you're watching a soccer game, very important. It's about which team becomes a champion, and you're looking and moving and are totally involved in what you're seeing. Then suddenly a fly comes in and it sets itself on the screen. So for one moment, you forget about what you see on the screen, you see the fly, and you see the screen itself. The whole event on the screen disappears, and you see the screen as nothing but a complicated lamp, a surface which emits light. At that time, at that moment, what's on the screen becomes totally equal, just light. Immediately one must think about the second chapter of the Zhuangzi, things becoming equal, on the quality of things. So that's the point I was thinking. Here is something going on. Here is a similarity. Here is an insight that is beyond culture and period of time. So now we know something about reduction. We have the third question, and that is the self technique or the conversion. I refer to a philosopher or Hellenist, Pierre Hadot, who lived from 1922 to 2010, and he studied ancient Greek philosophy. And what he observed was that the situation in philosophy during the time of in the ancient Greece was not very different from the situation in the time of the Zhuangzi, the Warring States period in the 3rd century before the beginning of our before the Common Era. So it means that philosophy was for becoming happy, and you learned it from a guy who knew how to do that. So you learned it from a master, and you listened to the master. You went to visit him. Maybe you lived close to him, and you listened to him. After some time, philosophy declined, and in the West something appeared like we call now Christendom. In Christendom, you don't listen to somebody, you listen to your preacher, but the main thing is that become a different person depends not on the one you listen to, it depends on someone high up in the sky. So because the tradition was broken, Christendom took over the task of philosophy, the role of philosophy. There was a lack of true philosophers, and the teaching of philosophy was not about the presence of a present teacher, but about an absent teacher. We only had books to read about, and philosophy became the art of writing and reading books. Nowadays, if you're a good philosopher, not somebody who stands a lot, you are somebody who has read a lot of books, and you're writing books for people who write books. So the idea of a conversion, of changing yourself, has vanished from philosophy, but it was present in ancient Greece. And Hadot also observed there were two kinds. You had the repentance, the purification of yourself, becoming your original self, becoming like a baby, becoming the pure soul in Platonism. Or you had, and that was, you could say, becoming what you are. And the other kind of conversion was the not repentance, but the change, the reversal, where you become what you're not. Which means that you take a leap and everything changes, and you just drop what you were. And the reversal was very common, was the way of conversion, which was common with the cynics and the skeptics. The skeptics described the event with the example of a famous Greek painter who tried for years in vain to depict the foam of the horse's mouth on his painting, and at last, in utter despair, he threw the sponge with which he cleaned his painting every time at the canvas, and what did he see? The perfect depiction of the foam. So it's something you work for, but it's something which happens unexpectedly. So my contention is that the Zhuangzi is a kind of phenomenological practice, and that is aimed at a reversal. So how can you, what is my argument? Well, if you look at the first chapter, which is called carefree roaming, or whatever the translation is, 逍遥游. The scene is set of the small and huge fish coon who becomes a bird. First element is that the fish is so big, it's unimaginable. The bird is so big and it flies so far away, it's unimaginable. This is what Kant called an introduction of an experience of the sublime. It means that you're overcome. If you really try to imagine what's happening in this first chapter, what's happening, if you really try to imagine it, you're blown away, your imagination stops, and you're without ideas, without thoughts for a small moment. This is an ideal situation for a reversal, for a total conversion. And we see that in the sequence of this description, there are examples of a frog, a little bird, who can't follow this, who say, okay, it's a nice story, but I have my own affairs and it's nothing for me. And then another important indication is at the end of the chapter. We have the story of the useless tree. To change yourself, you have to drop all your ties to your former self. And that means that you have to drop all your ideas about what you shouldn't do. In other words, you have to drop all the ideas of being useful. If we are all serious about this, we have to admit that what we're doing here is totally and utterly useless. So then in chapter 2, the equality of things, another example of uselessness and reversal is given in the description of the Tso Wang, the sitting and forgetting, the meditation. And after that, there is a mention of the different sounds in the universe, and you could say that this could point to an idea of phenomena, because a sound is a pure phenomenon. You can't grasp it, you can't take, I mean, in time of Zhuangzi, they hadn't recorders, or there was no tape recorder, no handhelds. So sound was disappearing the moment it was appearing. And of course, at the end of the second chapter, we have the story about the butterfly. Butterfly is freedom. Zhuangzi doesn't know whether he's a butterfly or not. And then a very important phrase is that, so this is the situation with things, which means that phenomena are not really separate, they're also not the same. They have a non-causal relationship. They're not apart and they're not identical, which is perfectly in line with the other remarks in the Zhuangzi about the interdependency of things. And it seems here that we have a far echo of a Buddhist conception, which is that emptiness is not just a gap in existence, is not an ontological antidote. It's merely the interdependence of things, which in phenomenology is called correlativity. This is only that. I'm a speaker because you're a listener because I'm a speaker. And if you take everything together, you have just nothing. Openness. And this is, to my mind, the most important message of the story about the butterfly. Well, the other chapters are not so dense in meaning. Of course, we have Yang Sheng cooking, which I think is a metaphor for So Wang. Ding also can mean concentration, other character, but same pronunciation. The Tao, of course, is a knife, but could also refer to the way. And if you're meditating and you're following the Tao, you see that you can chop off all piece by piece your traumas, your tensions, and your preconceptions. And that can also be a very good way to preserve your health and have a full life. So, by the way, Zhuangzi is not advising you to try to become immortal, because in the end, life and death are not that very different. How do we do this in the world? How would we behave in the world if we were liberated? Anyway, a perfect sage would be utterly useless and not involved in the world. Also, the first chapter is this point where an emperor decides to hand over the government of the lands to a sage, and the sage said, no, I think the world should govern itself. You leave the world to the world, or another remark is, you hide the world in the world. Sign of Transcendental Virtue, chapter 5, brings nothing. Oh yes, the perfect sage doesn't have any qualities, but just this absence of qualities, like Aitaito is great qualities. Chapter 6, I want to mention this shortly, mentions the few stages of reduction, putting things outside yourself, and politics is a recapture of the idea of being useless, only with another emphasis. Okay. And here are the stages of reduction. Reduction of the world, reduction of things, reduction of life, then the reversal, and then the developments after that. Okay, so my idea is that the phenomenological interpretation of the Zhuangzi would have the answer of a few problems: correlativity, indirect language, the Yuyan indirect language, and well, you see the other ones. I see that the chairperson is very impatient, so I close here and I thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good. Our third speaker this morning is Daniel Paracka, who comes to us from the U.S. state of Georgia, Kennesaw State University. He's going to talk about a little more contemporary application of Taoist thought, transcending antagonisms, Taoism's decolonial ontology, of syncretic interdependence and transformative reciprocity. Well, let's find out what that means. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about the chaos of the world. I think I realize I'm not a sage, and this title, there's nothing simple about the title. I think it's the most academic-sounding title I've ever had. Too much fancy extravagance and spurious adornment. So to talk a little bit about what would decolonial ontology mean, right? I think it's really about yin within yang and yang within yin. And that's a lot of what I'm going to sort of focus on, hopefully. We'll see. Yesterday I didn't ever get to the main points of my talk, and I'm going to cover some stuff from yesterday because I tried to connect things in the two talks, realizing probably that I'm not good at staying to my topics so well. But decolonial ontology, I think then would be not just blaming the colonial master, right? That recognizing the role of the colonized in both their oppression and emancipation, right? That they're involved in these activities, and they have an impact. They impact the colonial master or ruler. The United States, we're really proud of our system of government and our democracy. And its origins, if you ask me, are with the enslaved who wanted their freedom. The Africans who were enslaved, and we're talking about the value of freedom, and Native Americans whose systems of government were copied by Jefferson and Washington, right? So that's what that means. All right. Yeah, this is from yesterday a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Confucius Institutes this morning, and about the, maybe not so much about the pandemic, but the Belt and Road Initiative, and Tiananmen Square. In my mind, the United States and China, we're the two biggest consumers, we're the two biggest polluters, and if we can't work together and for change, then the whole planet is in a lot of trouble. So patience and equanimity are two vital qualities, right? That's from yesterday. And I didn't really get to talk about this yesterday either, but my favorite hexagram would be peace, right? That's what I want. I want peace in this world, right? And the hexagram is unusual. It turns things upside down. Earth, the three kun, the three broken lines, are on top of heaven, the three solid lines. Women, the feminine, are on top. So it's putting the receptive, the restorative, the restful above action, above force, right? And so the BRI, the Belt Road Initiative, is a yin activity if it emphasizes environmental sustainability. That's a big if. We haven't seen that nearly enough, okay? It's yang, certainly, because of its ambitious activity. And this is what I love about yin and yang and about the I Ching, is that it's a tool that really helps you be more analytical. You have to look at both yin and yang. You have to consider all the sides of the story. Tiananmen Square is definitely a yin force, speaking truth to power. I had a picture in yesterday's presentation, I never got to really focus on it, of Tank Man. You know, the guy in Tiananmen Square who stood in front of the tanks. We don't know what happened to him. Nobody knows, right? He's probably dead. We don't know for sure. But in my mind, he's an immortal. He will live forever. No one's going to forget him. Du Fu, the poet Du Fu from the Tang Dynasty, he's an immortal. Nobody forgets him. Why? Because he spoke truth to power. And Tank Man was speaking truth to power. All the students, what bothers me about Tiananmen Square in the collective memory of modernity today is that all we remember is the yang force, the crackdown, the tragedy, the horror of it. We don't remember the spirit of the students themselves and how genuine and sincere and authentic they were being about their wishes and needs. And Confucius Institutes are yin, certainly as a projection of soft power. There's some really good articles and books out there about soft power and hard power. You know, Joseph Nye is this guy who's cited everywhere in political science papers about soft power. And there were 120 Confucius Institutes in the United States within like 5 years of the first one being open. I mean, they just exploded. They were everywhere. We had one at my university. I was very involved with it. It was a great thing. Young, recent college graduates from China, from our partner university, Yangzhou University, would come to Georgia, and they would teach in middle schools Chinese language and culture. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. There was nothing sneaky or underhanded about it, right? There was no reason to close it down. Today, there are only 5 left. The United States government just published a report, the Government Accountability Office, in October, where they interviewed 80 of the closed Confucius Institutes. And the majority said that they were closed because of government pressure. The United States telling universities, we're going to take away your federal funding if you don't close your Confucius Institutes. All right, so let's see. So I mean, yin and yang both represent change and stability. I don't know, this is not so important. Let's continue. Or it's important, but everyone knows it. I think, relating this to what Devin was talking about earlier, to me, heaven and earth, well, not just to me, but there are scholars from the Sung Dynasty who were saying heaven and earth are the first sages, right? And so earth and heaven, they're both, they're generative, they give something to us, right? But yang is usually associated more sort of with ethics and justice and human rights and flourishing, and yang, because it's for that reason, it would be probably more Confucian, more active, in control, right? And yin is more Taoist, of this free-flowing of nature. So I think yin is more democratic. It's welcoming, inclusive. It's kind of, it's open. I think yang is more meritocratic. It's authoritative, hierarchical. It has clear rewards and punishments. It's more interested in national security, and yin would be more interested in civil society and the diverse opinions of people. This author, Ling, she's really great, and I think she passed away recently, a few years ago. And the sources are at the end of this. I guess I would change that title there, Yin Within Yang, and then it says soft power and hegemony. I guess I would say soft power within hegemony, right? That it's yin within yang. So, and yin would be represented by the cooperative power of international institutions. It's harder, again, it's harder to be yang. It's harder to be in control if you have diverse participation, right? If you have multilateral organizations and institutions involved in decision making, it takes a lot more effort, right, to get everyone to agree on things, right? And of course, yang would be much more about coercive power. I'm so impressed with China in so many ways, and so I'm not a I get upset when I hear what I consider sort of China bashing. It's way too easy to do. I think it's important to do it in some ways, for sure. But China's raised a lot of people out of poverty, and that's what they talk about with like the BRI. And poverty is a form of control, right? And war and violence and conflict, as well as climate change, are major causes of poverty, right? These things all leave people homeless, refugees, and so, again, the chaos of today's world, war in Ukraine, war in Palestine, threat of war over Taiwan, it's just, that's just not going to work, right? If we want peace, if our goal is peace, we don't need any poverty, and we don't need any war. It's obvious, right? So maybe that's where my title now has gotten away from being so spurious and adorning to simple, straight talk. So, you also, with the I Ching and yin and yang, you're thinking about things sort of internally and externally, and if we apply that to nation states, which is not such an easy thing to do, right? Internationally, I think the United States right now is super yang. I mean, we're ready to jump in and fight left and right, it seems like to me. China has been emphasizing participation in international institutions in a lot of ways. You could also say they're an outlier on their own. So these are my opinions, and they're definitely should be debated. Domestically, internally, China's yang, right? China is pretty tough on protesters and dissidents, and human rights and freedoms don't exist the way they do in the West. They're thought, the emphasis sort of has been on this idea of reducing poverty, right? That's the way you improve people's human rights. But and then in the U.S., generally you would see this yin influence of having lots of freedoms and rights and representation among a very diverse population. But of course, we have our problems in the United States with the incarceration of African Americans, huge percentages, and we have like the Lakota Sioux, whose Standing Rock land rights are trampled upon. So they're going to build the pipeline right through the most sacred lands of one of the native peoples who have experienced the most violence throughout American history. We're just continue to do it, right? Okay. So again, trying to think about then Taiwan, right? So my original idea, my original title for this session was actually the sort of transcending antagonisms and trying to focus on U.S.-China relations towards Taiwan. And this is a little bit of an unusual interpretation to make Taiwan the dot inside of both yin and yang. Maybe it doesn't work. But one thing about Taiwan, I think, is that, it's closer culturally to China than it is the United States. And it's closer to the United States than to China politically, right? And so Taiwan understands both countries very well. And I think that's really important to emphasize. So another way to look at this, perhaps, then, would be to say that Taiwan is the broken line between the two yang lines. That the United States and China are both predominantly yang. They're very powerful forces, right? Active in changing the world. And Taiwan is in the middle. This yin soft line, right? And this is the trigram for fire. But it might be a good place to be. Being in the middle can be a good thing in Chinese philosophy, right? And so if we were to double the trigram as a hexagram and have fire over fire, we might basically have the status quo. So this is a political term, right, that's been used to describe these relationships. The language on my slide here comes from Jack Balkin's I Ching descriptions of the hexagram, number 30, Li. And it says, he advises, or the I Ching advises in his interpretation, developing an understanding for who and what you depend on and who and what depends on you, on knowing what can be changed and what cannot. By nurturing others, you will nurture yourself. So I guess Taiwan needs to nurture its relationship with China. It needs to nurture its relationship with the United States, right? Because it depends on both of them, right? Do not cling to the past. Be open to change. Do not become enslaved to anxiety, pessimism, or despair. Don't bury your head in the sand. Consider how you and others can work together to achieve what none of you could do alone. It's great advice for Taiwan from the I Ching. All right? Now, what happens if the United States somehow changed? Yeah, so you could have, if Taiwan changed its line to Qian, to a solid line, you'd have heaven, you know. So that I don't know. That's kind of actually that's not so important because I don't think it's so easy to do. I'm not really going to talk about that, but I am. All right. So, but if the United States, like I guess this would be. I don't know. You know, this is a work in progress. This is what's happening right here and now. So it's very hard to, you know, have a clear analysis. But it would be, you know, this is really the strategic ambiguity has been a lot of what the U.S.'s position has been, right? That kind of trying to promote China's liberalization and opening to the world, while also defending Taiwan's freedom and security. And this is mountains over mountains, hexagram 52, which represents a deep sense of stillness and calmness that allows one to see things with greater clarity. 4 minutes, okay. It advises thoughtfulness and reflection as well as humbleness and contentment. It is not racked with resentment, jealousy, longing, or ambition. I guess this would be the advice to the United States, right? Is don't get too involved in this, right? Be still and calm, right? Don't fuel a fire of Lee, right? Be a mountain. Be still and calm, all right?
家。